Good evening, class. We're going to spend a few minutes discussing the competitive market and how it either does or doesn't apply to healthcare. First, I'm going to give you just a brief explanation or brief definition of what economists typically tend to think makes a competitive market. It's a model of the market based on the assumption that a large number of firms produce identical goods consumed by a large number of buyers. Seems pretty straightforward, fairly reasonable. If you think about healthcare, I think it to some extent is somewhat fairly described within this definition. Large number of buyers and sellers. If you think of, I think of Atlanta, I think of Buffalo, New York, where I worked the last time. Maybe you're located in Nashville, so you're thinking about the Nashville area. And think about metropolitan Nashville. A lot of buyers, a lot of sellers, and at least in theory, selling identical products. Office visits an office visit. The referral's a referral. If you go to a lab and they draw your blood, pretty much phlebotomist is going to draw it for you, whichever lab you go to, and it goes through the lab and they look at the results, they spin through and they test it and they give you the results. And most consumers of healthcare goods and services assume that it's done right. Same thing with radiology. Radiology, MRI, CAT scan, film's a film. Radiology film's a film. Film's taken by a tech, goes to a radiologist. That radiologist reads that film and sends the results back to your physician. Hospital services, probably a little more diversification, probably not as homogeneous a good or service as going to see your doctor or going to for an office visit. The thing that in a perfect competition and talking about identical goods, homogeneous goods, there is some diversification, some specialization. Some providers are a lot better at being a physician than others. I mean, it's just a fact of life. You have a lot of individuals, not only they go to different medical schools, they may go to different residency, different intern programs. Training is just different. In the United States, teaching research hospitals attempt to try to impart identical information to all identical information to those individuals that are pursuing a medical degree. Probably a lot different approach in the United States than it is to a physician coming in from a foreign country. But at the end of the day, I think it is deemed a somewhat homogeneous, somewhat identical type of good or service. Now, the joke that goes around, it was banded around quite a bit at Ohio State when I was there working at the hospital. What do you call the individual that ends up finishing last in the medical school class? Call that individual a doctor. Implying that it doesn't really. When you go to see your physician, you may have done some background information and you may have looked at where they went to medical school. You may have tried to determine, is the quality better? Is you're going to have a better outcome? Where did he do a residency? Did he do an internship? But at the end of the day, for the most part, unless you're a private pay individual, but if you're signed up through your employer group and you're going to a network that is put together by a managed care organization, and the only thing you really know is that physician that you're going to see, yes, you can look up his or her background, but that physician that you're going to see has, one, accepted the rates that the managed care organization has offered. They've negotiated a fee schedule or a rate schedule. It's going to pay for the goods and services that you consume. That physician has been vetted by the health plan, either directly by the health plan through typically their medical management team and their credentialing program, or they have allowed the medical group that the physician is practicing with, and it's called, delegated authority or delegated credentialing. At that point, they've allowed the medical group to collect all the information. That's what really credentialing is. They're looking for licensures. They're looking for, medical school diplomas. They're looking for internship information, residency information. They're trying to check, are there any criminal instances lodged against them of individual, malpractice. But a lot of check marks on boxes, and they're check marking them through. And again, it doesn't really matter whether the health plan's doing it directly or they're delegating it to the medical group. The end result is the same. They're just trying to vet an individual to see if they meet the parameters of being part of the network. So you go to see your physician, and I've got Anthem in Atlanta. You may have, if you're in Nashville, you may have, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. You could have United. You could have one of the regional plans. You could have, a national plan. But again, at the end of the day, typically networks are networks. Especially in small communities, networks are going to be networks. And in the Nashville area, may not be exactly. You may have some providers that have more of an allegiance to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, or one of the national players, or a local regional player. But for the most part, networks are networks. The only rub comes when if a managed care organization negotiates a contract with a provider, it's either negotiated that the provider has to accept all of their lines of business. And when I'll say lines of business, I'm talking about, private health care, Medicare Advantage, maybe some TRICARE business, VA maybe. Actually, VA usually contracts themselves. Maybe they're doing some Medicaid business. So they can either, I don't want to say force, they can either incentivize the provider to accept all the lines of business, or sometimes the provider will just tell them up front, I'm not going to accept Medicaid. I'm not going to accept Medicare Advantage. I'll take your private health care insurance with all of the employer groups in, say, the Nashville area, but I'm just not going to do Medicare, and I'm not going to do Medicaid. So that's kind of where we are when we're talking about buyers and sellers in the Nashville market, or any market in the United States. And when we're talking about either homogeneous or non-homogeneous types of goods and services. But kind of go back to the economics of, to the economist approach or economic theory. Economists have built this nice little model that represents, perfect competition. And it's built on, basically four main assumptions. Large number of buyers and sellers, homogeneous or identical goods are bought and sold in the market. Buyers and sellers have complete information about the market, which includes complete information about prices, and early entry and early exit to the market. And economists will be the first to admit that those firms, especially in healthcare, that meet these assumptions are probably few and far between, if in fact any at all, in the let's just even say the global market, if there are many at all, even in the global market, that meet these assumptions. But it helps economists to kind of, I guess, clarify or simplify this very complex world that we're dealing in. And the kind of basis of this competitive model, and it's really driven by the homogeneity or the identical assumption of the goods and services produced, is buyers and sellers can't really influence the market, and buyers and sellers are basically price takers. At the end of the day, it's basically a situation where buyers and sellers are price takers. Now, in the just in a normal, I guess, market economy, especially in the short run, if we're talking about profit maximization, there's only two decisions a firm has to make: how much to produce, how to price the product. And if in healthcare especially, the price is set by supply and demand. Supply and demand in a given economy or different a specific market. Nashville, Atlanta, Buffalo, New York. Supply and demand is going to set the market price for these individuals. And with any firm, profit is maximized. And I think we've talked about this before, when marginal benefit equals to marginal cost. That is the profit maximizing equilibrium. I don't hate to say equilibrium, but that is the profit maximizing price and quantity that's going to, and it's set based on marginal benefit equals marginal cost. Now, if we back up just a little and we think about just what I just said, how to price, especially how to price your product. Again, if I'm a soybean farmer or a corn farmer in the Midwest, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, maybe even over into Missouri and Iowa, and maybe a little farther than Midwest, and I'm growing corn, I'm growing soybeans, I may be growing wheat, and at the end of the day, it is a pretty competitive market. I've got a bushel of corn, I've got 100 bushels of corn, I've got 20,000 bushels of corn that I want to sell. And Joe Blow down the road has a market order that, he maybe that individual produces cornmeal that people use to make cornbread or, cereal or taco shells or, a lot of different commodities that you can use cornmeal for. But that individual is looking to purchase corn. I've got corn to sell. And if the spot price on the market for a bushel of corn is $5, and every farmer is going to sell at $5, then that individual is going to offer me $5 for my bushels of corn. And I'm going to sell my bushels of corn for $5 because I know I can't get more than that on the open market because there's too many other producers that are going to sell that individual bushels of corn for $5. And there's no reason for me to sell it for less than that because I know I can get $5 for it. So, and that's the way that things work in a competitive market, especially when we're looking at homogeneous goods and services. Now, if you crank that back just a little, and we talk about healthcare, if you think about, let's take a primary care doc in the Nashville market, and we're going to use Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee as the payer. And so those individuals, when it comes to negotiating the rates, and it's probably the office manager that's negotiating the rate for that medical practice, the health plan knows because they've negotiated rates. And let's say that this provider group, they're all internal medicine docs. So they're all primary care type docs, may have a subspecialty in cardiology or geriatric care or something, but for the most part, they're going to be providing office visits. Not a lot of surgical expertise is required. And so you've got Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee has somebody in the network management team has negotiated a multitude of rates in the Nashville market. And they know exactly what they're paying all other primary care groups. So they are going to set on the negotiation range, they're going to set that upper limit. They know how much they're willing to pay, and that's the maximum amount they're willing to pay based on supply and demand characteristics in the market. You've got the office manager down here with the primary care group that has negotiated several contracts, not just with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, but they've got a contract with Aetna, they've got one with Centene, they've got one with United, they've got some local plans that they've negotiated contracts, and they know what the minimum dollar amount is that they will accept based on all of the contracts that they've negotiated. And this individual is looking at, so you have the health plan that's looking at their suite primary care groups and all of the prices they've negotiated. You've got the medical group down here that is looking at their suite of contracts and all the prices they've negotiated, and they go butt heads to heads, and they spend, could be months negotiating, and they finally determine a rate that they, the medical group's willing to take and the health plan's willing to pay for goods and services. They sign a contract, and that's how that provider's rate is going to be determined. And that provider's rate, for the most part, runs from January the 1st until December the 31st of the next year. And then you go through another negotiation process, unless it's one of these kind of contracts that, and a lot of health plans do take this route, and they will negotiate a 2, a 3, a 5-year contract, because negotiating contracts, it's a stressful process. It takes a lot of resources. And if you negotiate a multi-year contract and tie the rate increases to maybe the consumer price index or some type of cost of living increase, so that's what you're kind of looking at in the negotiation process. So at that point, those physicians know that if they accept a Blue Cross Blue Shield Tennessee patient, here's the price that they are going to receive for those goods and services, those office visits, and they know what it is. If it's a multi-year contract, they know what it is for this year and next year and the years in the future. And in the long run, they can actually do, a fairly good job of strategic planning and deciding how to move forward. The essence of all of this contract negotiation, and the fact that they have both sides have what they think is complete information, that kind of meets one of the parameters of a competitive market. The fact that this health plan, or the fact that the health plan is providing these goods and services to employer groups and the medical group are providing office visits, it's kind of sort of meets that homogeneous assumption. The fact there are a lot of buyers and sellers in the market, that kind of sort of meets that assumption. And then lastly, the assumption where you talk about easy exit and entry, the easy entry part, I'm not too sure about that one, because if you think about healthcare, think what it takes, and we talked about that, I think, in the last meeting. Think about what it takes to become a physician: undergraduate, medical school, residency, internship, maybe some specialized training. So it's not that easy, and then you have to be able to pass your boards and your licensing within a particular state. So easy entry it's just not that easy to get into the healthcare environment. And if you look at easy exit, it's going to depend on the relationship that especially, and I'm just talking about on the provider side of that financial coin now. You think of the contracts that provider may have negotiated. They may be leasing a building, maybe a long-term agreement. They may be leasing equipment, maybe a long-term agreement. Labor, fairly easy to get out of those contracts. Most states are what they call at-will employers, so it's pretty easy to get out of the contracts. But in a healthcare environment, I'm not sure that it's that easy entry and that easy exit. And I think with that, we're gonna stop for a few minutes, and when I come back, we will just talk about the healthcare market just in general and see how it matches up with the competitive market model that healthcare economists use. Talk to everybody in a few minutes.